All right, Steve, we are back with another episode of the Work Week After Hours. And this one is a special one. This one is kind of a trial run for us, if you will. We are doing this one live here on LinkedIn, Steve.
Yeah, it's our unveiling, or the big reveal, if you will. We've been talking about the big resignation. Now it's the big reveal. And yeah, I'm excited. Let's go live. Let's see how it goes. People who've been following us probably know we don't edit these at all. And maybe we'll figure out technology at some point, do some editing. But it's raw and it's uncut. Yeah. And we're really, there's so much to talk about this week. I feel like my feed has been full of new stories and new things going on.
Absolutely. I guess before we get into that, I often wonder, you were at LinkedIn way back in the early days, and now here you are as a consumer, as a civilian out here in the non-corporate office world. It's kind of wild now that you're using the platform in a very different way than what you were building, not that long ago, but in the age of technology, it's a long time ago. It's kind of wild. I think it's kind of wild.
It is wild. And, having sat in, I was there, 2009 through 2012. So just shy of 4 years. I never imagined there'd be some sort of live feature like this. I mean, one of the things, and you and I talked about this a few episodes ago, I did feel that the way that the resume mutating into a LinkedIn profile, the way that was going to be sort of a live call it a movie trailer about who you are when you go apply for a job, instead of just a one-dimensional, profile. And we'd always added, hey, you can put a video in here. But we're starting to see, and this is sort of a transition technology, people are going to have more context on you as a person and as a candidate, as a business partner, associate, if they can see you live in action. Right. And that's something you can't really get in an interview. So it's a pretty cool new dimension.
Hey, so one of the things that we're going to have this episode, and we've already got Jack Lawlin just talked to someone about the Great Resignation about 10 minutes ago. Go figure. So that's awesome. So we have people out there. This is good. We're going to have questions. So anybody watching this, there might be a bit of delay for when you see it to where we are, just of how things are with technology. So if you ask a question, just give us just a second and we'll do our best to kind of circle that in with the conversation of what we're going to talk about today. And like you said, we don't edit these things. One of the feedbacks that we've gotten continuously of they just love the casual approach to the conversation, to kind of sit and riff on some stuff happening in the technology world. So one of the things that I find interesting is, I think this week, let's dive into this whole notion, or the question, I guess, that has been brought up about, can you have culture in a work from home environment?
It's so timely. Let me share with listeners a really interesting experience I had just yesterday, like less than 24 hours ago, talking to a firm who is concerned that they weren't the senior leaders, but their senior leaders were leaning towards bringing everyone back into the office. And so we got to talking about, well, why are they wanting to do that? And I heard why they didn't want it to happen, but why are they doing that? And where we kind of landed, Shane, was that this company has some very beautiful buildings. They have some great perks. They have some great on-site benefits. And as we got into it, what they started to understand is that their senior leaders were uncomfortable that they are going to be forfeiting assets that had been very helpful recruiting talent. They're building, their facilities are gorgeous, on-site childcare, beautiful cafeterias, no longer a relevant source in attracting and retaining talent, which was a big part of the culture, or the vibe. Being there was really great. And now they're nervous around how to realize the same recruiting and retention objectives that they'd had before without having these assets. So it's kind of game on. And so on one dimension, this is the part of this whole pandemic, which I find fascinating and challenging so hard, is we sold people to join us because of our culture, which was almost always tied to at least some physical assets, right?
Yeah.
And now we don't have those. And we weren't really prepared for that.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I've got a lot of gravitas, a lot of grace for companies that are trying to struggle with this one. But how do we think about that? Because if you strip it down, Shane, our culture is this right here. You and me. You're my boss. I work for you. That's my cultural experience with the company now in front of a screen for many people. Now, that's not all people. Obviously, there's a lot of frontline workers still back there. But how's that for culture from, things and places to interactions entirely?
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's safe to say, I think the people like yourself, the people who've really spent their life's work to try and create a better work environment, a better future of work. I think it's always been kind of understood that, company culture isn't the ping pong tables and the beer on tap, and those are perks more than they are the actual culture. Now, I think from the outside looking in, it's definitely been sold as part of the culture, but that's not. But I think you quickly realize, and I'm sure the people at Google have. There's no doubt the people at Facebook have. You quickly realize that that's not what's going to keep people, right? That's not what's going to get people to do their best work. Does it enable an environment? Yes. I mean, I'll tell you this. This is strictly my opinion and my observation. I visited Google. This was probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. Probably, I had a family member that was working there. He said, "Hey, stop in. Just park anywhere." Which is a whole nother wild story in itself. But he showed me all the things that they have, and I remember thinking, they don't these aren't just perks. They're creating an environment to where you don't even have to leave. And that was very it was I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. Right. So in some ways, it's what now do you have to make this colossal shift? And we talked about, Google on our last episode about the payment calculator and those things. Again, they have the behavioral data to understand those things. Is there, now all of a sudden, if 30% of your staff now is no longer in office, from a culture standpoint, how do we reinvest those funds, or how do we reinvest that financially into things? And I don't know, it's a like you said, it was sold this thing, and now it's how do we sell it? And the good and I won't even say good. I'll say the great leaders will have it figured out. They'll figure it out pretty quickly. They'll figure out because they know their people. They're in tune. Do you think that's fair to say?
I think we're seeing more experimenting starting to take place than we've had before. And yeah, I do think ultimately we're gonna figure it, because we have to figure it out. But the part of this conversation, is not deep in culture, but it is definitely contributing to the conversation. I mean, environment is part of the culture, and the environment of where you do what you do. I mean, work isn't where you go now, it's what you do. And I think part of the struggle for some has been, I want to show you I care about you. So look at these beautiful things that I am providing you. And that was a statement, whether it was, hollow, whether there was merit to it. I still think those companies, great buildings close to public transit and all these other things designed to bring you to where you do traditionally, where you did work, was part of an organization's, arsenal to prove to you, hey, you really are important. Look, we're not just slamming you into some sweatshop here. We're putting money on the table to demonstrate to you. Now that hasn't been part of the asset. Now there's really got to be meaningful interaction to build that recognition among the employees. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And I've seen everything from experimenting with online games, experimenting with intentional downtime, intentional nap time, intentional day, don't even come to work today. Don't even log in today, to, lots of different measures companies are trying to take. And I think it's great, great to experiment. But some businesses are nervous, Shane, because let's say you're in the investment community you're managing people's money. You can't be playing around with some sort of cultural experiment here. Like we got an obligation, like we got to deliver good returns or we're toast. And I don't want my customers thinking I'm playing around with this whole back to work thing.
Yeah.
You know?
So Wall Street is known for, let's just call it what it is. Wall Street is known from a work culture standpoint of work you until you die, right? Like we're going to work nonstop. We're going to work crazy hours. We're going to you're going to be like, that the financial, even I think in Japan. And I remember seeing like these guys get 2 or 3 hours and they're going to get something to eat and sleeping in the restaurant and then going back in. So your money, it's because the perception of you making me money is somehow tied to you spending 18 hours straight in the office, right? It's like this, it's this perception of what it is. And yeah, I often wonder, I sometimes put myself in the shoes of if I had a team now, what would I go through? What would I do with those things? And, I guess it's real easy to play, leader in these times, but to actually have the financial sheet in front of you, have the investors, have the board, have the public perception, all those different things. Like it's not easy. And creating that culture I think experimentation is probably the best prescription for all of it in a lot of ways.
Right. And I want you to share with me and the audience, because we never had this conversation when you were your first time CEO. When did that bell go off, or maybe you knew going into it from prior life experiences, some of which you shared in some of the episodes, that, how we do what we do really, really matters, and why culture is important. I mean, being in the HR world, it's kind of like air. Like you got to breathe it. Like if you don't get that in HR, and unfortunately some people don't, then you're in big trouble. But, I've heard it referred to as culture is who you hire and who you fire. Like who behavior you don't tolerate and who you ask to leave is a real cultural moment. Culture is what people say when others aren't listening, and culture, is defined in lots of different ways. For me, it's pretty simple. It's, what is the environment that we can produce that will deliver the best outcome for the company and the employees? Hopefully, both. Like, what is that? It's the rules, it's the lack of rules, it's the place you do work, it's the hierarchy or lack of hierarchy, it's the communication, who's shared, who's invited, what titles you use, all these things. Yeah. There's a language and a code that you create. And I tell first-time CEOs all the time when they say, well, we're starting to think we should start defining our culture. And I said, how long have you been around? They're like, oh, we started this about a year ago. You already have one. And they said, what do you mean? Well, what do you wear when you show up at the office? Do you bring animals to the office? What hours do you work? Who are you sharing information with? That's starting to define whether it's not about writing something that's going to be a poster on the wall. That's the wrong outcome. Yeah. But, and I also believe, in this, and I just want to get this out of the way so we can kind of dive into it, because we can debate what culture is, and there is no right answer. I think it's just what environment, norms produce the best possible outcomes. But I do think that it's something today that if I'm hiring younger talent earlier in the career curve, I think what they want is to build culture, not to be told what it is. And I used to be scared by that notion, like, oh, I better, I'm the seasoned HR executive. I better tell them what it is. And I found when I gave that up, when I gave that right to define the culture to my employees, we almost always landed in the same place. Good company, want to work with good people on leading edge technology. I want to grow. I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference. And I want to have a life. It's like, okay, me too. So let's come on in and do it. And I think this is the trap we talked about a few episodes ago, where if senior leaders think it's on them to have to go to the mountain and write on the tablets, I think you're going to miss. You're definitely going to miss. And if you invite people to be part of that, you're going to be successful.
And maybe you don't feel the miss, right? Because the bigger company, when you're the guy, you don't really feel the small, big losses, meaning the really good people in this department, or your best person in this department. You may not feel that at you know, a LinkedIn or a Google or a Facebook. But you know, you asked kind of how on my end, like what there's some things I learned really quick about being a first time CEO in regards to culture. One, what I learned is there was so I don't care if I don't know if you want me to share like some of the failures and what I learned and how to kind of figure this out, but I learned that there were two traits that were successful. Unfortunately, I learned that there was a second one that aligned with the first one a little bit late in the process, right? One was altruistic. We were helping kids achieve opportunities to get scholarships to play sports. So it took a very altruistic person to want to do that, to want to be a part of something, of helping someone change their life. What I didn't learn, and I understand the psychology of it now until I was halfway in through doing this, is that has to also be paired with somebody who is highly motivated to help themselves. And I don't mean as in like self-help. I mean like they want to be successful, meaning way more people are altruistic that are okay just kind of putting it on cruise control and not being driven by KPIs and, you know, and also personal success and personal growth financially and successfully within a business. So, you know, so what I was doing, I wasn't looking for that piece. In the early days, I was just looking for the altruistic piece of, I had a I think like a Colby assessment where they did, and I wanted to understand what motivated them, what drove them. And yeah, I learned that. And once we learned that they also needed a piece of not just want to help people. A lot of people out there genuinely want to help people. They genuinely want to be an altruistic person, but to have that piece to where just a notch down, they're like, look, I'm okay with helping everybody else, but I want to get mine too. Like I want, I want that. And that was the mix for what we were doing in that. And yeah, I mean, I screwed up and tried a lot of things. Like we traveled a lot around the world. So I would hire someone and then we would go on a trip to Australia or New Zealand for 3 weeks at a time. First couple people I hired, they love that. They're like, oh man, we get to go for free to Australia, New Zealand and work and meet these people and be gone for 3 weeks. This is great. And then I ran into a couple people after those first 3 and they were like, yeah, I mean, that's cool, but I got some personal issues going on at my house, or, I've got some different things here and this just isn't going to work. So you just, it's that trial and error. So it kind of goes back to, that process of now how, like, does that, like, I almost wonder if those like off sites now become part of culture, right? So like if you've got this huge remote company now, or you've got now 500 staff in these 2 departments that are now remote, is that the knee-jerk easy move to help start building the culture? Or you know what I'm saying? It's like what's the low-hanging fruit that you can go to kind of lift this culture up again, right?
Well, let me first, because I can't stop my brain from working, be your human resource leader in the situation that you're facing.
Yeah.
Because what you learned is what everyone's struggling with right now, which is a great lesson, which is my hiring decisions have yielded some unintended results. Like I've got some people that the spec I was hiring to, they met the spec, but now that they're in here, they're not showing me some dimensions that now I'm aware I need to have informed that. So the fork in the road for you at that point is, can I grow that in them? Can I create a culture where people are hungrier, curious, have the growth mindset, in addition to this altruistic dimension that you spoke to. So, and that's where some companies struggle. Like, hey, that's the kind of profile that we want to build. Those are the kinds of, people we want. To what extent can we provide an environment that fosters that? And to what extent is that dependent on us recruiting? But here's the hard part that COVID's delivered. I don't know if my profile of a successful employee has just changed. My hunch is probably, but how? What kind of person in my company, in the way we're going to work, and we still don't really know what that is yet because we're experimenting with iterations of hybrid and home and in the office some days. We still don't really know what our long-term is, which is really got to be so unbelievably intolerable for many CEOs. Like, I know I have to sort of meet the needs of a new, employee demographic. I got to get some results. I'm just going to make a call. I don't have time to be, hand holding people through all this stuff because we've got thousands of people. But also, they've got to recognize we have new ways that we're going to have to create value. And how is our culture changed? And how is our profile of the person who's going to thrive here changing? And we've always had one of those 3 or 4 things change, but now all of them change.
All of them at once. Yeah.
It's not fair. It's really not fair. But that's why we're in this really weird spot. That's why my phone's ringing off the hook. Steve, how should we handle this? How are you thinking about it? And I almost have to say, listen, just step back. Do you have the Calm app on your phone? Like, flip it open, take a breath. Your competition, I promise you, is having the same problem you are. You don't have to land this perfectly. Let's just start and try to get a little bit ahead of where your competition is.
So I'm glad you hit on that, because historically, and I think that's the differentiator when we're dealing in competitive markets with competitive companies, is sometimes internally now we're dealing with a problem and our competitor doesn't know it. And if they're to find out, they might get an advantage on us, or they might take, well, right now it's okay to be transparent about it. It's okay to be experimental about it, because everybody's going through it. So it should almost be freeing in some ways. And you and I have seen that. We've been on the phone with some CEOs and they're like, I've got all the answers and this is what we're going to do. And then we've been on the phone with some CEOs and they're like, I don't know squat. So if you can just help jar some things loose and just get people thinking, that would be great. And I think there's a different, now I think some of that is knowing your company, but I think some of that also is being open to, things are different. And, so to kind of reframe the question, then we've got a couple questions that have kind of come in. Do you think, and it's a high level, I realize that there's multifacets to this. Do you think culture in a remote work can be an advantage for a company? I don't want to lead you here, but can the companies who figure it out, once they figure it out, and it's still early, it's still super early. Once they figure it out, do you think that's a competitive advantage in the hiring world?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even need to think about that. And it's not an all or none choice.
Yes.
It's it doesn't mean your whole everyone, and not all jobs are going to work that way. I'm an extrovert. I want to be around people, hugging and high fiving. I don't want to be at home, but some days I definitely do. And I love the freedom that I tasted and I'm projecting, but 100% that I think there's ways, and what was the hottest thing before the pandemic? Diversity, inclusion, equity, and inclusiveness. Wow. Think about it now. How many organizations had people who are important in remote places not feeling like they're part of the conversation? Now they're part of the conversation. How many people were in a meeting in person and didn't feel that was bringing out their best, and now in a new domain they can do it? So I think the diversity inclusion agenda has been given an opportunity of a lifetime here. And shame on us if we don't take advantage of that. So relative 100%. To, diminishing bias, including more people. And I had a debate with our friend Barbie on a webinar, Barbie Graver, who's just an outstanding expert on remote work. And I was like, oh, Barbie, I'm really worried about, the muscle, the informal moments when people's guards are down, for there to be creative opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, you mean like at the water cooler? I'm like, yeah, those. She goes, the water cooler was always flawed, Steve. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, it was kind of based on who sat near the water cooler or who went to the water cooler, and it wasn't an equal footing. I was like, whoa, I never thought about it that way. Thank you for shaking my tree a little bit. And she's right. And so I think we have a huge opportunity to be able to create something better, and every executive should be inviting that opportunity right now. Everyone.
And that statement makes sense about it being flawed, meaning like, your small talk only happens within the people that you're comfortable in including in the small talk, right? So like, it's only, when you and I have a personal conversation, it's typically not just me and you. Now, your wife might be in earshot and my wife might be in earshot, and when we get off, there may be some chiming in that occurs based off of the perception of that. But it's you know what I'm saying. So like in an office, it's we're the huddles, and we've all the different terms that we've heard about it. So that makes
Right.
total sense. That makes
Right.
total sense.
I had have had a mentor work for him, Bob Bailey, CEO of PMC Sierra, when I was there. And he and I were in a bit of a text exchange last night and this morning. He's like, "Hey, saw your stuff on the Great Resignation. Here's a few articles." He said, "But there's part of the conversation that he wanted to weigh in on, which I haven't talked about as much as I should." And he was sort of encouraging me to sort of look at this holistically from a CEO's perspective, which has been the last 20 years of his working life. He now sits on a few boards and advises a bunch of people. But he's like, any good work there's reciprocity. The company's got to be in, but the employee's got to be in too. And that's got to be a fit that both needs are getting served, right? I'm going to count on you, the employee, to serve, and the employee, you got to count on the company's going to serve you. And I feel like the conversations I've seen on the pandemic have swung to the employees got the power, and they've been missing out on that power, and they're going to take full advantage. Like, I have more leverage professionally than I've ever had before. But I was thinking about it when Bob's point, and I think it's a really good one, which is, how do leaders, and this carries right to the wheelhouse of culture, how do leaders know you're committed? How do they know you're in? How do they know? And maybe you don't need to be committed and be all in to do good work. I don't know. Some people, I mean, I've had points in my life where I was not that motivated, but I was delivering, value. And we all ebb and flow at different points in different organizations, but that's got to be something hard culturally for leaders right now. Like I'm used to be able to measure the experience and the investment that my team has. And now the normal ways that I do that have just been detached, disabled. Yep. I don't have them anymore.
Yeah.
And I think culturally that's got to be a bit of a struggle. And how do we do that in a way that's not going to add to this burnout that everyone's starting to feel, you know?
Yeah. No. And I think it's funny you talk about measuring it. I even think it's like, I don't even think in this environment you can even gauge like revenue and sales and financial performance even as a gauge, because the market's so skewed right now. Like there's so like we're still not completely open, and now we're going back. So it doesn't mean that just because you put a new policy in 4 weeks ago and now everybody's sentiment just got totally turned upside down because the Delta variant's now taking off again, and now all of a sudden your production's down. But that's not because what I'm like. There's so many variables that are playing a part of this, and you have to. I think I'm obviously in no place to give anybody definitive action, but I think you have to be very open-minded, and you have to almost start playing a little bit of a longer game with some of these changes and experiments. Otherwise, you can't knee-jerk reaction to something that the market shifted or the COVID shifted, or because it's all of a sudden, you and I have literally heard this in the last 2 days where companies, people are telling us that are bringing you in to come talk to these companies, and they're saying, well, we were told 6 months ago we were going to be in the office, and now we're not in the office, and now they're telling us it's going to be another 6 months. And to be honest, we don't even know when it's going to be. It may not even be like, you can't like, that's not like, I understand as an individual contributor, as the, everyday employee in the business, I understand how that can cause you to have some negative sentiment towards leadership. But the reality of it is shit, they don't know either. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to wrap their head around it. And, it's just being like, we got to be like, the culture, if we're going to have one remote, takes both parties, right? It takes two people. And like you said, it's what we have. And ironically, it is what we have. You and I developed it. You and I started this arrangement in the middle of COVID, having never met, completely remote. And now here we are. We had a retreat. We had a retreat where, Shane came out your way for a week, but we're intentional about our culture. We're intentional about checking in. We're intentional about not just making it always a business conversation when we have in.
Right. And the interesting thing is we never said we're having a culture conversation. And
No,
I mean, maybe we should even step back for a second and say, why do we even care? Why does culture even freaking matter?
Yep.
Right. Like, who cares?
I agree.
Right. And everyone probably assumes, oh, you're the HR guy. Of course you care. Like, no, I don't really. I mean, I want to win. Okay. That's what
100%.
I want to do.
100%.
I want to freaking win. And I had this debate with my human resource team, and I used to play this game, and it was a little bit unexpected for a lot of the candidates I was interviewing. I said, what is HR's goal? Are we here to make people happy? And a lot of times people go, oh yeah. I go, nope, wrong answer. We're not here to make people happy. We're here to win. It just so happens happier people tend to win more, but the goal is not happy. The goal is winning. And this is where I feel people get tangled up in culture or tangled up in just engagement. Engagement doesn't mean high engagement doesn't mean there's happy employees. It generally means more people are happy than unhappy, but the goal is not happy. The goal is to win. And that means hard conversations. That means talking about difficult stuff. That means having an environment where people feel, it is okay to talk about the elephant in the room. Right? That's what it's about. And so why do you want a culture? You want a culture because you're going to deal with tough stuff, guaranteed, you're not expecting, and you better be ready to deal with it. And if we have some norms around how to deal with it, good. And I'll tell you a funny story. We, at some point, like 6 years in at LinkedIn, we're like, hey, we should probably we're all the general executive team were relatively new. I was the last one in the door after Jeff Weiner started. And he was really not a huge fan of culture because he's seen more harm that had been done by someone holding the cultural baton or draping themselves in culture. And then an executive team did the exact opposite of what the espoused culture values were. But we got together and said, let's do a refresh. And one of the things that we felt really important to us was open and honest. People need to be open and honest. And everyone's like, oh yeah, definitely. So, okay, let's write that down. Open and honest. Well, a few months later, we started seeing shouting matches and screaming matches. And we get people together. Hey, what the heck's going on over there? Well, I was being open and honest. And we're like, oh, okay. What we meant was open, honest, and constructive. So
yeah.
But that's where the power of some of this stuff lies in, which is, and I think in this era of we're having a hard time talking about politics. We're having a hard time talking about racism. We're having a hard time talking around diversity. Maybe the bigger thing is not that topic. It's how we learn to talk about hard stuff.
Yes.
And for me, in my world, it's you didn't make your number, your boss isn't really happy, or you're not happy with your employee. Like, let's talk about how did we get here and how can we get out of it, right? So it's always uncomfortable. I mean, I've lived a career talking about uncomfortable stuff. I've had uncomfortable stuff personally. You've had it too, personally and professionally.
You and I have had some uncomfortable conversations.
That's right.
That's
right. And so how do we navigate that? And the knee-jerk, the human knee-jerk that I've seen most of my career is I'm not going to do this because I'm going to get an emotional reaction that I don't think I'm prepared to handle. So I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to skirt around it or passive aggressively try to go through the channel here. And to me, and this is, I gave my first talk on, diversity that I've ever given in the last year. And it was all around this, the capacity to talk about hard stuff. And I think that's something every company should focus on. But that's why we talk about culture, because we know there's going to be disagreements. We know people are going to see things differently. So let's develop a framework that facilitates us getting through that. Right. Yep. And that's the why. And it's usually around, because McKinsey told us it's important. So we got to do, or the Stanford MBA course says we got to have a good culture, or, oh, look at Google. They got to, and don't do it because other people told you or some school did. If you want to build a great organization, whatever it is, 2 people, 10,000 people, thinking about how to do that in a world of inevitable human collisions, and disagreement is really, really a worthwhile undertaking.
Yeah. And
so that's why right now we've got this whole new landscape that's been presented to us. How are you going to address that? Because we had, many companies had years and years of offsites and, oh, this is what it is. And now guess what? We're upside down. We're hanging by our ankles from the ceiling.
Yeah.
How the heck are we going to create value? And so it's not so easy, right?
I want to ask you something, Steve. This is more of a personal question, but not about like I'm not trying to get too personal here, but COVID, you're a family guy like myself, and COVID. I don't know that people have thought about this that live in the professional world, but COVID also caused us to reassess our culture and our personal life. It allowed us to it forced us, not allowed us. It forced us. I think you and I both know people who were married that were professional, and then all of a sudden now we're spending, instead of 2.5, 3 hours a day with each other, now they're spending 24 hours a day with each other. Some people found out that they didn't really like the person they were married to,
or they didn't know. They didn't know.
They didn't even know. Yeah, they didn't know. They
Yeah.
didn't know about their kids. They didn't know their kids were struggling in school. They didn't know, like, these things. So it forced a reassessment of our personal culture, right? Because the culture can be in anything. It's in the neighborhood, it's the city, it's the, wherever, right? So I almost wonder if there isn't some sort of reflection back in that, because you did. I know you, I'm not going to put your personal business out there, but you've talked to me about, from a parenting standpoint and how you're a dad and what how you assess this. And I did the same thing. Heck, I'm moving to a whole nother country because of it, because I reevaluated my culture and my family. So, I think I almost wonder if there's not lessons to be learned from what we've done at home of now applying that in our office, or on our team, because the same grace that I've got to give my wife now that I'm now around her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with 3 kids running around the house, there's got to be a bit of grace and change now, to knowing that, like we said, we're not the only ones doing this. So you're going through this as well. You're on the other end of this, and your life is madness just like mine is. And you're looking at me and just glad you're not talking to somebody who you're related to. And I'm looking at you thinking, I'm glad I'm not talking to somebody I'm related to right now. And I'm having an adult conversation that doesn't involve my kids.
Yeah. And let me expand on what you just said. So I think if we have a moment in history and moment in time in our lives right now, which if we don't take advantage of, shame on us, which is, we all had a window into each other's personal lives more than we've ever had. I don't care what you do. You know more about the lives of your coworkers, your employees, your boss than ever before. You saw your boss have to negotiate with her husband to have the dining room table be her office, or whatever. Like, you saw, whoa, I've never had to see my CEO, in an uncomfortable spot at home, or, you saw how someone talked to their child, and you're like, whoa, that's definitely not how I would talk to my children. Like, whoa, I saw a window, and we know each other more. And we've had something which our grandparents had and our parents had, which is we now have had a shared experience on a global scale, which used to bond us, which used to be community. Like, we all were seeing the same shows on TV. There was 3 channels when I grew up. That was it. My sister and I would fight over who would go and change the channel. No, I did it last time. You do it now.
You're telling your age here, Steve.
Yeah, right. And so, but we had this shared experience. That's gone away. I can dive into my YouTubes, my Netflix, whatever. I'm watching something I don't even know. That's why these things like Ted Lasso, why are they meaningful? Because we're all watching it. For me, like, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, my whole team, we were watching Survivor. So much so, like, we had like the immunity idol, like who was going to, we all voted on who was getting voted off that week. It was great. And now we have this moment where we're all going through this together. And yes, it's hard. And yes, lives have been lost. And it's tragic, but it's also tragic if we don't take advantage and carry this forward, and find that the merging of home and life that we've seen, which was a hostile takeover by the pandemic, like threw those two together. Yeah. And maybe there's a beauty that we can realize better than what we had before, a lot better. And it's going to take time, and we're not going to, realize it overnight, but let's be open to that possibility. right? And that's the thing that I'm fighting right now, is this inertia. Go back to what we know and control. And for leaders, my power base is based on the structure that we used to have. Why do I want to entertain a new one, Steve? And they're not telling me this, but I'm reading between the lines. Like what you're saying is, you don't know that you're going to be as valuable in that new design structure. So you are going to resist. And the worst resistance is passive aggressive, because they say and they don't do it, right? And I've been guilty of that sometimes in my career, so I shouldn't get on my high horse. But that's what we're facing right now, is this inertia, and human nature likes consistency. But we also are more open to change when everything is changing, right? At home and at work. But yes, absolutely. And for me, I think I told you about this on a phone call we had earlier today. Something happened to me today that I haven't done in a long time. Is like, I'm refusing to meet with people in person. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't have any, no COVID related fear. I just like, no, I just like to flip it on, flip it off. Like, I'm not parking. I'm not having to get dressed. I'm not having to shower. Like, no, I don't want to do that. And it just hit me today. I was like, wow, these two people I would both be very interested in meeting with them, but I don't want to. I just want to do it like this.
Yes. No, absolutely. And it's very much this opportunity to just, when we dig ourselves out of the rubble, right? When we dig ourselves out of this thing, it's almost like, after every disaster I've seen, as I'm 41 years old, and I've seen different disasters, from tornadoes to earthquakes to hurricanes to something as horrific as 9/11. And 9/11 happened, and not to get like all sentimental or really connected, but I think there is something to this. When 9/11 happened, I remember the energy in people following 9/11. I was just kind of starting my work career, and I remember, like, I even get the hair on my arm right now stands up when I think about not just an American, not just like, oh, we're going to get these people. And it was like, okay, we're going to come, like, this is what we do. Humans are resilient, and we're going to, like, it was almost like it took that smack in the face to like say, okay, let's take a breath here. We just went through the dot-com bubble was about to happen, all that, like, it's all that's like, let's take a deep breath and let's figure out how we're going to do this, and let's move forward. And I think that is where we're at, of this, like, we're going to make it. We're going to figure this out. We've got great people here to help us. People are going to step up. Just like in times of an emergency, everybody becomes a paramedic. Everybody becomes an ambulance. Everybody becomes a cook and a caretaker. That's what we do. So I think embracing that in some way of putting it together, and not to kind of put it out there, but like that whole survival guide of, like, now that this happened, it happened to us. There's no running from it. How do we build out? And I think a piece of that survival guide is, how do we build that culture? Does it even matter? I think that's even probably, I don't think we're going to answer the question, can you have culture? I think what we're doing is actually going to just change the conversation. Do you even need to worry about it right now? Do you need to be spending time on culture, or do you need to be spending time on your people? Because I think those are two different things.
Well, I think if you spend time with your people in whatever capacity that is going to land you in the culture. I mean, that we had a conversation a number of episodes ago. We were struggling in the early days of Lincoln. We just couldn't recruit. So it forced us to realize that culture could be a competitive advantage, and that was it. But the question we asked was, why does anyone want to work here? And in retrospect, that really was a question of, like, what's our culture? Why does anyone want to work here? Like, when in a career candy store of Silicon Valley, why would anyone want to go there? And then it brings up everything. How are you rewarding people? How are you treating people? What is the expectation? What's the upside? What's the benefit? And many of those answers you can achieve without money. Like many of the cultural dimensions, how much is developing your people important to you? How much is moving people around important to you or not important to you? Or how thoughtful do you want to be? And, I'll add on to what you just said, Shane, which I hope our listeners really replay, because you just gave some really great advice. And I had 3 clients in the last week I'm talking to, and they're just, oh God, we're losing our people, man. This is really hard. We're losing more people. It's harder to recruit people. One CEO, you and I were talking, it's like, I've seen my leaders are like deer in the headlights. This is really hard stuff. And yet when I asked the question each time, well, how's business right now for you? Oh gosh, we're killing it right now. We're just growing market share, stocks improving, the value of the company's improving. And I said, I want you to listen to what you just explained to me. Well, first, everyone's going through what you're going through right now, dealing with the talent shortage and trying to understand the new psychology of the workforce. That's why I wrote my book, Workquake. But at the same time, look what you just said. In an increasingly frenetic, unpredictable, seemingly chaotic, more fluid employee population, you're realizing greater success. But you're feeling like failure because you've defined success by people got to stay here a long time. Maybe you're looking at that problem the wrong way. Maybe we start with, are we winning? Yeah, we're winning. Are the people that left going to do cooler, better, neater stuff? Yeah, maybe that's a win for us and for them. Maybe we prepared them for greater things. Maybe we can recruit based on how good people are after they're here, not based on how short they're staying. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe we're winning because we got rid of those people. Maybe they were slowing us down. Maybe they were, yes, all those things.
That's right. And maybe we undervalued new people with new ideas coming in and solving problems from a different perspective. And maybe that's more valuable than someone doing the same thing for 3 to 5 years, getting a little stale, getting a little tired, playing a little what I call career defense. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, Matt, it changes from one organization to the next.
Maybe your culture becomes, okay, you're not allowed to work here any more than 24 months in these roles. Maybe there's all these things that it's that time, and it's that time to break out the Petri dish and start putting samples down and see what grows. And
exactly.
See
exactly. What was the article that I think you sent it to me? 2 million retirees, unexpected retirees. And that's just, I mean, we're still in it, Shane. And my wife and I were talking today. We're like, we're going to be wearing masks for at least another year, maybe 2. Like, we're not through this, and 2 million retirees, and we're just starting. Like, whoa. And what was do you remember what some of the attempts to explain that out were?
I think some of them were I think it's because it's still early. They're still trying to pull the data. They have the data of the number, but it's trying to figure out the why. I think a lot of it had to do with an older demographic not wanting to go back into a place of work where their health is at risk, at a greater risk. Some of it was the market has done so well that they realized they were able to retire early over the last the last 14, 15 months. So there's a lot, there's some, I think those things are just on the surface. I don't think I think those things play a part, right? Like a person, there's an ancillary part to this. And, I think this definitely gets into probably our next episode, I think, and we'll, kind of hit on it. But I think, the question then becomes, if a person is leaving because they don't want to put their health at risk, are they leaving because it's not possible for them to do their job anyway? Are they leaving because their direct report told them, oh, nope, we're not doing remote. I don't trust you. We're not going to do it. We could do it, but we're not going to do it. So that person said, well, I'm just not going to, are they retiring because they have to? Or are they retiring because their leaders or their place of employment didn't make quick enough, didn't make adequate changes? Listen, I think a lot of times, and rightfully so, employees and individual contributors definitely get scrutinized. And I think it goes the other way too. But as a leader, I personally don't believe you're not immune to criticism when it comes to judging your actions and what you say and the reason that you said them. Right. It's one thing to say, I don't know if we're going to go back to work full time. I don't know if we're going to go back in the office. It's another thing to say, we're not going to do it. And you're doing it. And you're saying that because you don't trust the people that you've hired and you've trained.
Mhm.
So I think there's a difference there, but I do think it's another episode. Yeah, but yes, you're right. Like it's there's so many layers to this, and that's why I love having this conversation. Is we can go so many different ways with this. So I think
Absolutely. Well, what do we got coming in the feed there, Shane? Any of the questions look like they're
yeah, we'll
worth us
knock out a
commenting
couple
on
questions.
or
I think they're all
thoughts?
worth
Yeah.
commenting on. I think we'll see if they're relevant right now. We'll pick out two questions here that have kind of come in, and before we kind of wrap it up, so Callum, I'll actually put it on the screen here for those of you that are tuning in to the live version of it here.
Whoa, this is fancy. You can do that,
Hey,
Shane? That's
oh
pretty
yeah.
cool.
Hey, now
Oh, wow,
we're
man.
not.
You are the man.
No, well, I appreciate that. So what is your opinion on benefits like free gym memberships or other parts of quote unquote company culture that encourages employees to do things that make them healthy and happy while not always at the office?
Well, my perspective on that is wellness is one of the most important things that people should be thinking about, and healthy body, healthy mind. And it's, to me, if I'm doing that, I better also be backing that up with trying to curb downtime for people, making sure that we're turning systems off. Like, gym membership's fine, but when you're asking me to go, it's 7 p.m. Sunday night to be on a Zoom, like, come on, man, like
Yep.
that doesn't fly, right? So absolutely, I think those things are healthy. Having built on-site gyms and then having to talk to the field offices, go, hey, we don't have an on-site gym, and you give us the membership, and you're like, yeah, but you don't have to walk through the halls and face the CEO and he's cranky. Like, you got to benefit being out there in the field. Like, we got to deal with that over here. So, but I do think that that's some wellness related, and helping people and giving people permission to have the time to do that is almost more important than the gym membership, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one more here. We will go with John Lee. It's kind of a statement, really, and kind of brings up an interesting point. So, great conversation, guys. One angle on culture is that how we behave is a mix of our individual personality, our organizational culture, and our national culture. When we talk about wanting to quote unquote win in US culture, winning, i.e., survival of the fittest, plays a big part in how we work. Whereas Steve mentioned earlier, that's what he wants to do. He wants to win. Whereas in other national cultures that are less quote unquote survival of the fittest, like Nordics or the Netherlands, having a quote unquote winner takes all mindset might not work as well.
Yeah. So yes, John, absolutely. And this is why leadership is so hard. This is why they don't pay us enough. And not only do you have variety in national culture, you have variety in US regions, regions of Europe. And I'm a big believer in microcultures are okay. And it's a good worthy discussion. But sometimes I've found when I start talking about what you bring up, John, with my senior executives, they start looking at me like, don't make this more complicated, please. I just want to do this as simply as possible. And it's not a simple topic, obviously, but I think we have to have an openness and a respect that local dimensions are really important. If people are going to do their work in local arenas, we've got to be compatible there, right? And I know you've seen some of my TikToks, John, and thank you for checking in here. But I've mentioned a whole bunch of stories on my TikTok around, I'm sitting over there in Asia and something comes in from the US headquarters, and I'm just like, that is not going to work over here at all. Even things like performance management or ratings distribution or performance-based bonuses. In South Korea, it was just kind of like organ rejection. Like, no, we win and lose as a team. I'm like, really? And I've told stories on this podcast around my awakening in China when we were in a lawsuit with Cisco against Huawei, which is partially owned by the Chinese government, maybe fully owned. And our employees at Cisco, we felt Huawei was infringing on our intellectual property. Our employees, when we sued them, were like, why are you doing that? We're like, because we're taking bread off your table. They're taking bread off your table. They're like, no, they're not. I was like, whoa, okay. I completely don't understand the culture here relative to the hierarchy of loyalty and things like that.
Yeah.
But it is not a simple exercise. And I think that's why my bias is to be open to microcultures, be open to a diversity, but try to settle on your core, as much as you can. And maybe winning isn't the right word that I would use in the Nordics. Maybe is like, let's thrive. Let's realize the best that we can be, and don't we want to do that? Like, why are we spending all this time unless there's something worth spending the time on?
Yes.
Like, I don't want to spend all this time to have some sort of mediocre B result. I want to be making a wave. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think this whole live experiment was good. I think
awesome.
It was,
I got to find a way so I can see the comments and see who's coming in. So we got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. I think I'll show you. I'll set you up. So, yeah, man, this has been great. I think we'll have to definitely do this again. I think maybe we'll bring some guests in. I think we're trying to line our first guest up for next week. You and I both know him. We won't leak it out there yet, but you and I both know him, and
great.
I think he's doing some really cool stuff. So we'll get him out there. I know he's watching too because he liked in earlier. So
awesome.
Yeah. So it's been great, bud. I appreciate
it has.
This has been good. It's sometimes, it goes in different directions, and I think that's a good thing. So
it is a good thing. And so let me close here. This is Steve Cadigan with
Shane Howard.
And you're listening to the Work Week After Hours. We try to get an episode out a week, just talking as if we were sitting in a picnic table, park bench, at a bar, just talking about stuff that's topical right now. We hope you found it interesting. We hope you let your friends know about it. Please share, give us a thumbs up on whatever podcast service you listen to. And if you got ideas on things that you'd like us to dive into, by all means, let us know.
Cheers.